Hello dear students. Today's lecture is on geography and nomadic groups in West Asia. The objectives of the study shall comprise: first one, to understand the detailed geographical horizons of the West Asia. Second, to understand the emergence of various nomadic groups in West Asia. Now coming to the topic. The term West Asia is partially synonymous with the Middle East, which describes the physical location in relation to Western Europe rather than the place inside Asia. West Asia is a broad term for the countries that are part of the League of Arab States, Israel, which has both Jewish and Arab population, Turkey, and Iran. There are three main groups of these states. First, North Africa, which is made up of Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia. Number second, the Fertile Crescent or the Levant is the area along the eastern side of the Mediterranean Sea. It is made up of Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza Strip, as well as Turkey, which is not an Arab country. Finally, the oil-producing countries of the Gulf and Arabian Peninsula, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, Yemen, and the Persian-speaking country of Iran. It also includes Armenia and Azerbaijan, parts of the Caucasus, in its wide classification of West Asia. Afghanistan is sometimes also included in a broad definition of Western Asia. From time to time, discussion has questioned the rationale for the classification of Iran, Turkey, Israel, Somalia, Yemen, and Tunisia under a single group, that is Middle East, given their diverse historical and cultural backgrounds. But the grouping West Asia is based on a principle, since the countries in this group have had similar historical experiences with the spread of Islam, the reach of the Ottoman Empire, and European colonialism. The landmass of West Asia has a unique geographical position as a link between Asia, Europe, and Africa. There are three primary physiographic divisions. First, the mountains and plateaus of the north. Second, a central depression aligned with the Persian Gulf. Third, a peninsular mass with ranges along the southwest edge. The northern high ranges are parts of Eurasia's great alpine system that have recently been folded. The central ranges go in different directions from the center, which is shown by the Armenian knot. Those in the peninsula are fragments of an old stable block that have broken apart and moved apart. The Transcaucasus, the Iran Plateau, Anatolia, and Arabia make up the West Asian highlands and are labeled in an anti-clockwise order. A group of mountain ranges surrounds the plateau of Iran on all sides. The eastern rampart is made up of parallel but broken ranges and is in the middle of Iran. The highest point of the range, Kohi-Taftan, is 4,042 meters south, where Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan meet. People from semi-nomadic tribes who graze their animals on the higher slopes above 1,500 meters make up the small population. In some places, water is brought to farms through underground channels called canals. A mountain range with three parts runs along the north side of the plateau. In the eastern part are the parallel ranges of Aladag and Kopetdag, which define the border between Iran and Turkmenistan. In the middle of the Elburz range, which is a sharp rise from the Caspian Sea's southern shore, its highest point, Damavand, at 5,604 meters, is the highest point in all of West Asia. It is a tall volcanic cone just north of Tehran. A lot of these highlands are used for grazing sheep and goats. A wide variety of crops are produced on the lower slopes below 1200 meters and when there is enough rain. The Sabalon is the highest peak in the western part of the Tavelish range, which bends northwest towards Azerbaijan. A group of fault block ranges surround valleys where meat is grown as the main crop. The Zagros Mountains dominate the southwestern region of Iran and extend southeast from Kurdistan to the Strait of Hormuz. The mountains consist of parallel ranges that are high and rugged, and this highland complex has an average width of 300 km. The northern half, which receives more than 400 mm of yearly precipitation, is agriculturally developed. The highest point, Zardko, is in the middle of the range, west of Esfahan. It is 4,447 meters high. Kurds from the north of the Zagros Mountains are farmers and semi-nomads. Many tribes in the central and southern Zagros move from one place to another. Their migration with sheep and goats is mostly vertical from permanent winter bases to summer pastures higher up to 1800 to 2200 meters. Now, Transcaucasia. This mountain range is distinguished by two parallel ranges that span from the Caspian Sea in the east to the Black Sea in the west. The Great Caucasus, which is located in the north, stretches along Russia's southern border for nearly 1200 kilometers. Having several glaciers, it is a young mountain range with a high elevation. Despite the prevalence of older ridges, the tallest peak, Mount Elbrus, is an extinct volcano, indicating intrusion. The mountain range serves as a climate barrier between the wet west and dry east. The main economic activity is sheep grazing on the grasslands on the top slopes. Due to less rain in the Nival glacial zone over the last 100 years, the equilibrium line of glaciers has moved 300 to 500 meters higher. Due to human activity, the forest cover in the lower zone has diminished significantly. The Little Caucasus, which is in the south, is part of the faulted Armenian plateau, which passes into Iran and Anatolia. The short Suram range, that is 500 meters, connects it to the Greater Caucasus. In a different place, the Kura and Rioni valleys separate them from each other. The Little Caucasus has a lot of volcanoes that are no longer active, and earthquakes happen there often. Mount Ararat is located in its southwestern part, which borders Turkey. At the moment, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Russia are the four political units that constitute Transcaucasia. However, over the years, the region has served as the natural haven for variety of peoples. It is a region with a great deal of linguistic and ethnic diversity, with over 40 different languages spoken. Now, coming to Anatolia. The Armenian Plateau is an important focal point from which mountain ranges split to Iran, Kurdistan, and Anatolia. They surround high plateaus, the largest of which is the interior of Anatolia. It is bounded to the north by Tatos, Dagleri, and to the south by Toraz, Dagleri. The Tatos range, which is also known as the Pontic Mountains, starts at the border between Armenia and Turkey and goes west all the way to the Black Sea. Along its 400 km stretch from Erzurum to Sivas, it contains many high peaks, including the Kekardagi. Its western branch, Ligaz Dagleri, goes up to a height of 2600 meters north of Ankara. Most of the land in the western part of Inner Anatolia is a steppe with few trees. The summers are hot and dry, and the winters are cold. Precipitation happens mostly in the spring season. Wheat and barley are the predominant cereal grains grown in this region. It is also important for raising livestock. The Armenian plateau in the east is broken up by very steep slopes. The primary crop is wheat, and the summers are brief and arid. The two main livestock are cattle and sheep. The Taurus mountains are shaped like an arch and run parallel to the Mediterranean coast along the southern edge of the Anatolia plateau. Even though Irsias Dagi, the highest peak, is far from the coast, its slopes are very steep. The mountain spreads out in a north-south manner west of Igridir Lake to complete the confinement of the Anatolian plateau. The area is mainly affected by a Mediterranean climate. Lower slopes are ideal for growing tree crops and vineyards, whereas upper slopes are best suited for raising cattle. Now, Arabia. The region of Arabian Peninsula that gave rise to Islam is found in Southwest Asia, specifically between Iran and Iraq and the northeast of Africa. Arabs were the name given to the people who lived here. The people who lived there were Semitic and most of their land was empty. But there are oases here and there, and the land around them is fertile. There was not much rain, so the land turned into a desert. The area had few people, and as time went on, more and more Arabs became nomads and were called Bedouins. Camel herding was an important part of the Bedouin way of life, and the Bedouins utilized their camels to transport goods from a variety of areas, including Syria. Conflict between different tribes were common since they were accustomed to a hard life. As a result of the lack of a strong central administration, raiding cities, robbing caravans, and brutal conflicts were all too prevalent. Despite these negative characteristics, the Arabs were bound together by a common faith. The Arabian Peninsula is surrounded by mountains on the west and south sides. Beginning in Lebanon are the first ranges that run north-south and parallel to the Mediterranean shore. They are allies on either side of the Rift Valley and as far south as the Gulf of Aqaba. The highest point in Lebanon is Kornat as-Sawada, which is in the western range. Anti-Lebanon, which is in the east, marks the border between Lebanon and Syria. The western range is the highest in the area with a height of almost 3,000 meters. Its eastern side goes down sharply into the Bekaa Fault Valley. The Anti-Lebanon range is in the north and the Hermon range is in the south. In the south, these ranges stop the Jordan River and the Dead Sea from flowing through Israel and Jordan. They are mostly made up of big beds of folded limestone that have a rough surface. The western side of the ranges provide a Mediterranean climate that is ideal for orchards, vines, and other winter crops. Rainfall occurs from north to the south, comparable to the region's division into mountain ranges and valleys. The economy is a contrast between intensive horticulture in the west and the nomadic herding in the parched east. The nomads are made up of a number of Bedouin tribes with flocks of sheep, goats, and camels. The western highlands of Saudi Arabia are a rocky upland formed by an old crystalline complex. They make a long, narrow plateau that is topped by steep mountains that face the Red Sea. The rough terrain makes diastrophism, volcanism, and mass wasting likely. From north to south, they range in height from 900 meters to 3,700 meters. The range's highest point is Yemen on Jabal an-Nabi, west of Sana'a. The range then makes a sharp northeasterly turn from side to side Hadramaut to Dhofar in South Oman. Even though they are close to a big desert, The highlands don't get much rain. Rainfall also varies from about 130 mm in Arabia in the winter to more than 1000 mm in Yemen in the summer. Green Mountain or Jabal Aghdar is at the eastern end of the Arabian Peninsula. Past the valley of Rabil Khali, physically these highlands in Oman are an extension of the fold mountains of Zagros in Iran. The highest point in the central range is Jabal Asak-Sham, which is 3035 meters high. Even though it has upthrusts and graben-like depressions due to faulting, much of it has a plateau-like shape and is surrounded on all sides by sand or water. Terrace farming is supported by abundant precipitation in Yemen's and Hadramaut's mountains. They grow fruits from the subtropics and grains like wheat and barley. Nomadic tribes with sheep and goats move around to find grasslands in other places. Nomadism, pastoral nomadism, and nomadic empires are all important parts of West Asia, just like they are in Central Asia. Now coming to Bedouins. Bedouins legends say that they are the descendants of one of two fathers, Joktan, the great-grandson of Arphaxad, son of Shem or Ismail, the son of Abraham, the Hebrew, and Hagar, the Egyptian. Joktan's descendants believe themselves to be purer than Ismail's descendants since they are related to Shem. People think that the Arabian Peninsula is where the Bedouins were born and where their culture grew. From there, they moved to the Middle East and then to northern Africa. Nomadic tribes moved into populated areas along the eastern coast of the Red Sea and drove out the people who lived there before. They did this because they wanted to live near fertile land and water sources. Notably, they established Mecca and Medina, the holiest towns in Islam, which are now a part of Saudi Arabia and are thought to be the spiritual hub of all Muslims. Bedouins are a group of Arabic people who don't feel like they belong anywhere because their way of life is based on moving around to find places to graze their animals. Bedouins have always lived and worked in the desert because of how it looks and where it is. They raise camels, horses, and other animals that can be ridden across the desert. They also herd sheep and goats, which gave them meat, milk, and wool that can use themselves or sell. This way of life led to the development of a patriarchal, hierarchical family structure in which the closest relatives stick together under the leadership of the head of the family, and many families stick together under the leadership of the sheikh, which means an honorable person who is respected by everyone, to form a social unit called a tribe. You can find these nomadic tribes in the deserts of Arabia, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Libya, Algeria, and Morocco. Another idea about where Bedouins came from is that they might have come from the Qahtani of the Hadramauti uplands. The term Qahtani is used for Arabs who originated from the southern area of the Arabian Peninsula. They dominated the caravan trade in addition to being camel breeders. The Qahtanis claimed descent from Yabib ibn Khatan ibn Hud, one of the monotheistic prophets. One important thing about the Bedouins in West Asia was their relationship with a group of people known as the Salebis. The Salebis are said to have come from a tribe in Arabia that hunted and gathered. The Saleb lived differently than the Bedouins because they didn't herd camels or other animals for a living. They mostly made a living as dealers, livestock surgeons, or woodworkers. Because Salebis were skilled and good at making things, Bedouins often turned to them to get things they needed to herd camels in the desert. The Bedouins were the first people to convert to Islam when it became popular in the 7th century AD. They helped spread the religion throughout Arabia especially the Arabian Peninsula and other places where Arabic is the main language. Bedouins made up the bulk of their armies and occasionally acted as rulers who forced their will and religion on the conquered people after invading new regions. This was true despite the fact that they made up a very small percentage of the overall population in any country where they landed. As Muslims, the Bedouins believe that there is only one God, Allah, and that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his prophet. However, because of their nomadic lifestyle and inability to gather for prayer in a mosque, they devised novel solutions such as the single prayer, in which the person prays while living on a type of mantle or a prayer carpet, which is meant to represent the defined limits of the mosque and point in the appropriate direction of prayer. In this context, the situation of the majority of Israeli Bedouins is distinct. In the permanent Bedouin communities, we can observe multiple minarets of mosques constructed by different tribes praying together. It is also important to note that Islam did not have all the answers for the Bedouins who lived in harsh, dry places. As a result, they made up their own set of beliefs that were more practical and went against Islamic law. It is also important to note that local belief system didn't have all the answers for the Bedouins who lived in harsh, dry places. As a result, they made up their own set of beliefs that were more practical and went against local beliefs. Because of the combination of these factors, Bedouins were able to maintain their composure in the desert. The majority of Arab Muslims, including the Bedouins, identify as either Sunni or Shia, one of the two main branches of Islam. The Bedouin migrations outside their homeland and their interactions with different cultures over the past 3 millennia have had no effect on their ancestry or identity. Bedouin culture is a single thing, and most of the differences come from where they live and how the environment and conditions there affect them. One should also recognize that the different family nests which make up the tribe were the most important way that the Bedouin culture was kept alive and passed on from one generation to the next. The natural rise in population within the mother tribe led to its division into several tribes, a process that spawned a new kind of social structure, the tribal confederation that was broader than the family-based tribe. The tribal confederation is a group of tribes and clans that work together and are led by the sheikh or Sheikh al-Mashaq, whose duties include making decisions about raids and war. The Bedouins assert that their inheritance is the result of careful adherence to the fundamental elements of authentic Arab culture. Another thing that makes the two groups of Bedouins different is how far away they wander. Semi-nomadic Bedouins are those who gave up long-distance traveling. Ashkenazi went even further and divided the semi-nomadic Bedouins into three groups. First, those who move around within a limited area, built goat hair tents or tin shacks depending on the seasons, and herd flocks of sheep and goats. If members of this group own private lands, they will return to them periodically to sow and reap. Second, those engaged only in herd raising. Third, those who distanced themselves from the traditional Bedouin way of life, abandoned wandering, and made a living as hired workers. The primary traditional source of income for Bedouins was tending livestock and herding camels. They used camels for transportation as the region of Arab is entirely deserted. They were also semi-sedentary because in some places they farmed for a year and then moved on. Since the Neolithic period, people in West Asia have been raising sheep and goats over time. People have learned and improved their skills in raising sheep. In order to do this, they needed places for their cattle and camels to graze. Around 1100 BC, Bedouins began to move around with their cattle and camels in search of grazing land. Scholars like Kuhn say that the Bedouins who raised camels may have come from the Gara people of Hadramaut who raised cattle. Due to a lack of resources in the highlands, the Gara are reported to have been forced to relocate north into the desert, where they were unable to support themselves through agriculture or cattle breeding. As a result, they turned to camel rearing, which was well suited to the desert environment. Even though the culture of Central Asian nomads was similar to that of West Asian nomads, Central Asian nomads were different from West Asian nomads. In contrast to their West Asian counterparts, pastoral nomads in Central Asia were self-sufficient in multiple ways. The horse was the cult animal among the Central Asian tribes, whereas camel breeding was common among the Bedouins. Bedouins who raised camels used lances as their main weapon. The Arab nomads used to live in hair tents, while the Central Asian nomads lived in yurts. They were the perfect shelter in the desert. While nomadic empires ruled over sedentary societies for ages, nomads never altered or evolved with the habits of the sedentary groups. With this, we conclude today's lecture. Thank you.